our message for today. You know that when Jesus was preparing his disciples for his departure, when he was going to be leaving, and this is so pertinent right now as we're coming upon our Easter week next week. The process that Jesus talked to his disciples, the way he spoke to them was so eloquent and so beautiful and such a perfect example for us. I just want to start out the lesson with, as the disciples were gathering together, an argument started among the disciples as to which of them would be the greatest. How often does that happen when we've come together and we feel like somebody's got to one up somebody? Well, I've done this, and there's an importance about what I've done. And, oh, wait, did you know I know them? I know these important people. I probably would be probably the greatest among us here. And then somebody has another story. Well, no, well, I've done this and I've done that. And it's this one-upness. And this is what the disciples were going through when Jesus joined them. And can you just imagine in that time and day when everyone's saying, no, Peter, look what I did. No, James, I did this. And everybody's jockeying for a position to be in a seat of honor next to Jesus by what they've done or what they've experienced or been through. And it's interesting because we can hear those conversations amongst people who think they've done great accomplishments in life. And it's interesting because in the verse that says, sitting down, Jesus called the 12 and said, he didn't address, you guys, come on, this is ridiculous, stop fighting. That's not what he said. He said, anyone who wants to be first. You guys know how the verse goes? Anyone who wants to be first must be the very last and the servant of all. He did not address the way they were behaving because that only brings judgment. That only brings punishment. But imagine Jesus in his perfect example. Any of you who wants to be first, any of you who wants to be the greatest, and he's leaving these departing messages with them, must be the last and the servant of all. What a beautiful message. And we can all identify those people in our lives that don't jockey for the position of importance. They don't jockey to be, look at me, I'm so great. Now, I want to address too that that's part of our ego. How many of us know that we're going to get rid of our ego? Is that even possible? No, but we also don't have to shame our ego. Imagine we don't have to shame our ego just because we're wanting to feel important. We're wanting to feel acknowledged. We're wanting to feel recognized. We want to be important to Jesus. We want to be important to God. Okay, so let's look at that Phantom of the Opera, the dramatic song that Dylan so beautifully played for us. Christine wanted to be on stage. She wanted to be significant. She wanted to be important. And there's an ego that plays a part in that. Now, there was something that Greg and I were a part of at different times. And it was a training down in LA on self-expression. And one of the things they did address was your ego. Now, the way that we can perform or act or move through this world is what we can do is we can take our ego and put it in front of us. And that be the first response. And I'm so great, and no, I'm greater, and I'm going to talk over you, and I'm good at this, and I'm good at that. Now, that's just our ego. And what if we didn't shame that, but we actually thanked it for wanting us to feel significant, for wanting us to matter? And the way we can do this gracefully is in this training. And really your fear, your ego is your fear. The fear that I'm not enough. I have to bolster myself. I have to talk amongst my friends and everybody else how great I am. Right? And Jesus said, you want to be first, be last, and be the servant of all. So what if we took our ego and instead of punishing it, demolishing it, we just moved it from in front to beside, right? This is our ego. This is our fear. So that we don't have our ego use our mouth first in lashing out, in whatever it is. And we take that ego and we put it right here and we say, listen, buddy, it's all right. I got this. You can be right here. Give it a sandbox to play in, right? But you're not going to get rid of your ego by punishing it, by saying, I've got to get rid of this. I'm going to kill it. I'm going to, that's just more punishment. That's just more hurtful behavior. Because guess what you're going to do? If you do that to your ego, you're going to do that to someone else's that you see. But instead, if we take that part of our fear or our ego and we put it right here, we put our arm around it and say, listen, you're not going to lead here. I've got you. It's going to be all right. You don't have to act out. Let's be in alignment. I'm going to be in alignment with spirit, and I'm going to give you something to do, and I'm not going to kill you, and I'm not going to punish you. That's what Jesus did. He didn't come in and say how it was supposed to be. He didn't dictate. He didn't demand anything. He just simply stated, you want to be first? You want to be great in my eyes? Be last. Be the servant of all. Now, amazingly enough, watch how the ego played out for Peter. What does Jesus do before he departs from this world? He says in John 13:1-17, recounts that Jesus' performance of this act in these verses is that he instructs his disciples, if I then, your Lord, if I'm your Lord and your teacher, have washed your feet, you also ought to wash one another's feet. For I have given you an example that you should do as I have done to you. Okay? What does Peter say? No, said Peter in John 13. You shall never wash my feet. Because he's embarrassed. Jesus, my Lord, my teacher, I'm not going to have you wash my feet. No. And guess what Jesus says? Again, doesn't embarrass him, doesn't punish him, doesn't say, you need to take this gift I'm giving you. He doesn't do any of that. Jesus said, Peter, unless I wash you, you have no part with me. Unless you let me help you, unless you let me serve you. And how many times do we say no to somebody who's wanting to do something really kind for us? No, I'm not worthy. Or no, you're not going to do that for me. How many times do we push help away? Or a simple act of kindness away? Or a simple act that says, no, you don't have to be in poverty because I've provided this for you. And we say no. We say no to that. Unless you let me wash your feet, you have no part with me. He's not punishing him. He's just saying, you do not get to experience glory with me unless you let me serve you. Let me take what I have provided for you. Be compensated what you do for me. When someone says, I'm here and I can help with this, don't say no. We want to experience ourselves as part of the body of Christ that takes care of one another. Just yesterday, we had a wonderful experience with a horrific situation that Greg and I weren't able to take care of. And you know what? Ed shows up on the scene and says, I got this. Oh, if we just said, we were almost in a position to not even be able to say no. It's like, thank you. Thank you. He knew how to patch a hole. He knew how to put screws in a door that was broken. He knew all of these things. And he did something so kind for us. And all we could do was just say, thank you. And the only thing we want to do is compensate him back in some way. Thank you. That's what Jesus is saying. If you do not let me serve you, you have no part with me. Don't miss out on being a part with me. Don't say no to what I've offered you.
Well, and how does it feel when we offer something and we just really want to give? We're just in a generous mood, and the person that we're offering it to says, no, no thanks. As if it's only about whether or not they want it or they can take it, or they're feeling guilty about receiving it or worthy of it or whatever it is. It's a two-way street. And so often people see it as a one-way street. Mm-hmm. If I don't say thank you, people don't get to give. Mm-hmm. And we're looking at a bunch of scripture here that says, if you really want to do the work that Jesus called us to do, go out and give. Not back to Jesus, but to each other. And which is a lot harder, right? And it's been something that I'm constantly seeing. You see the homeless folks in Bakersfield, and you gotta admit they're very gracious receivers. It's the one place you can give and not have to worry about whether there's going to be some complicated, oh well, I don't need that, or oh please no, not, I don't deserve it. Think of it. Who's the least deserving? We have homeless people that are addicted, that are struggling, and yet they're willing to say, oh, thank you.
And God bless you.
Thank you, and God bless you. So there's a lesson there in there somewhere.
Well, and then guys, I really there's a beautiful commandment. It is so simple, yet so difficult, that Jesus leaves before he departs. This is the one commandment that he gives all of his disciples. Can anyone guess what that is? What is the one commandment? It's right out of John 15. Yes. And my commandment is this, that you love each other as I have loved you. Not, I command that you love me as I loved you. Because he knew how much we would benefit by giving it to others. It wasn't that it was to be reciprocated back to God in his commandment. He said, you will know them by what? You will know them by their fruits. You will know them by the fruits of the Spirit. They will have generosity and patience and love and kindness. You know someone who's connected to Source, who's connected to God, because those are the fruits of the Spirit. And his commandment to us is that you love each other as I have loved you.
And you got to be careful, because as we saw in the daily word reading, it talks about forgiving yourself as well as others. Well, what happens when we don't forgive ourselves? We treat ourselves poorly. We diminish ourselves. We cut ourselves down. We often hear, "Who's your worst enemy?" Right? Myself. So there is a difference, and I love. Could you imagine, Francis, if we just went back to love your neighbor as yourself? But if you really are struggling with self-esteem, loving your neighbor as yourself can mean to punish them, right? So the real commandment that Jesus gave was to love others as I have loved you, which try to wrap your mind around that. That's a whole other level of like, okay, you guys are going to betray me. That's okay. I'm going to be, crucified. That's okay. I do this because I love you. And seeing the big picture behind it all. So it's a tricky thing, it's like it seems so difficult, so unachievable to love other people the way Jesus loved us, but it's so simple if you just take it one step at a time. I love that little bumper sticker. What would Jesus do? Not what would Jesus do in life? What would Jesus do in this instance? Right? Just in this one instance. I can do that. And maybe, have all kinds of emotion around it, or, take too much credit for it or not enough or whatever, but at least you have that shining pole star. And Tamara and I have been listening trying to listen to the Bible and audio on YouTube. And it's like, I can't take any more of the Old Testament. I just can't wait to get to the point where Jesus steps in and says, okay, now that you got that out of the way, because there's a whole new reality called forgiveness. And it's not all about laws and rules and following and punishing and going. It's about forgiveness. And it's about, very simply, kindness. And Tim and I are interested in formulas for how to have great relationships, especially how to save a marriage, because there's a lot of marriages that fail in this country. And there's a guy named John Gottman that studied people's relationship. He didn't go in and say, here's a theory, come to my workshop, I'll teach you my theory, and then you can see if it works for you. He actually just went out and he called it the Love Lab. He takes a bunch of married couples into his lab and he studies them. How are they interacting? What's happening there when couples stay married for 50 years? What's present? What's present when all of a sudden a couple that's close together gets just turns into enemies and divorces themselves? And he basically, the whole thing, he's got a lot of material, but he basically whittles it down to two things. He says, the one thing that is present every time there's a divorce, guess what it is? You might think it's unforgiveness. You might think it's actually contempt. It's actually to talk down to see that, to think or feel that you are greater than your spouse, and to have them in contempt, which is that you can actually Google images of contempt, what the face looks like. It's just like looking at somebody like you're crazy, or what are you talking about, or what's wrong with you? Just that whole energy is contempt. And the one thing that he says is present, and this is the one, nobody guesses this either, because we've quoted his work a lot.
And he can tell within a couple of minutes whether a marriage is going to make it for the long haul, is if this one thing is present. One thing, very, very present.
What do you think it is? The one thing that's present in marriages that stay together and last a long, long, long time. Love. What kind? So there's a very specific kind of expression. Very specific. And it's not the content. It's not what people are saying. It's how they do everything with each other.
And I'm going to give them a big hint, because it's one of the fruits of the Spirit.
Say again?
Unconditional.
Unconditionality, but unconditional what?
Right.
She said love. Well, and that's a very specific kind. So nobody guesses it, so we'll just tell you it's gentleness.
Mm-hmm. Gentleness.
That the way those people are with each other, even if they have real disagreements, they're gentle with each other about that. So there's a tolerance, right? There's a sense that I'm not threatened. Or think of what's the opposite of that. Husbands that go to jail for beating their wives or their children. It's the absolute opposite of gentleness. But that's what he found. He said there's an element when he sees people that are married for a long, long time, even though they go through huge struggles or have real difficulties. No, I've met anybody who said, "Oh, marriage is easy," but it can be gentle.
Yes.
Even when it's difficult.
Yes. Yeah. Amen, brother.
Yes, sister.
Amen.
Amen.
Amen. But see, that is somebody who's dedicated their entire lives to wanting to understand what makes relationships work. And if you look back at the scripture, that's exactly how Jesus was, even in the face of arguments amongst disciples.
Exactly. He was gentle.
He was
in all situations. There's one, he turns the tables, right? And it's an
Oh, that's
example
true.
of where he goes in and he's just infuriated about God's house. And it's a turning point in the
Mhm.
Bible. And you had to have some drama in there for that.
Mm.
But by and large, if you look at what is he gentle in the face of,
Oh.
flogging, crucifixion, just the
Well,
whole
and
betrayal,
imagine he
abandonment.
knew Judas was going to betray him, and yet he trained him for 3 years. 3 years, knowing that his friend Judas was going to betray him.
And I've really been reflecting on that a little bit lately because it is the season, right? Is what he really had going for him. What Jesus really had going for him is he saw God's plan. He had faith in God. He had faith that even though this is all going to go down, I'm going to lose my life. I mean, there's not much more you can lose. I have faith that that loss is in alignment with something that's going to work out beautifully for me.
So what if we were that gentle with ourselves when our ego has run away with us and reacted when before we said, hey buddy, come over here on the side, right? That we took our fear of our ego, that we honored that there's a phantom inside our mind that has some good intentions of keeping us alive, has some beautiful intentions of making us significant or making us important. Okay. And that we didn't just beat ourselves up, but we took that fear, that ego part, that human side of us, and we just moved it to the side and we said, thank you for trying to protect me. I've got this. I've got another way. And we're going to align with spirit. We're going to align with our Father, Mother, God. We're going to align with what is beautiful in coming across and landing with other people as actually being gentle, as actually having the fruits of the Spirit because we've chosen to align with Spirit. We've chosen to align with God. And it's going to be evident because it will be in our behavior. There will be service that's happening. There will be people not trying to jockey for position. There will be people that are willing to be last because to be last is to be first and to be of service. So I absolutely love the example that Jesus gave us before he departed in his one simple commandment is to love one another as I have loved you. He's been the perfect example.
And
So
love
with that,
your neighbor as yourself.
and love your neighbor as yourself.
If you're treating yourself well.
Yeah. Yeah. So with that, we just like to open it up to you guys to see what came up for you today from the verses and the example Jesus was.
Jerry,
for us.
going
And
Dylan
Dylan,
first?
you want to go
Sure.
first, love?
Well, all that came up for me is I got an awful lot of work to do.
The political
That's
climate has
beautiful.
kicked Jerry's butt.
I got nothing. After that, I got nothing.
Tracine.
But you know what? Isn't that neat to recognize that, wow, cool. I got some work to do. That means there's a reason for us to still be here.
Yeah, it's, and it is such a tall order. It makes sense. It's like, oh no, the only thing I can face today is that I'm not there. I mean, it really is such a beautiful possibility that seems so far out of reach, especially if you look at what's happening, what's happened so much in the world lately in the last just few years. I remember, saying, it's so frenetic, praying, I wish things would just slow down. And it's like, here comes COVID, everything's slowed down. And yet to see how a lot of people have reacted to it, where, instead of like slowing down and reaching out, we've slowed down and really kind of, internalized and have been forced to. So, it's a tall order when all the energy is withdrawing, to say, you know what, I'm going to reach out. I'm going to do something.
And what's so neat is that we don't have to do it in our strength. So really, let's give God the glory for when gentleness does happen.
Yeah.
Because we've chosen to align with Spirit. And that's so beautiful that we don't have to do a whole bunch of effort to make that happen.
Right.
It's just a breath away.
It really is just one choice at a time. So many times when I'm just driving along and I'll see something just pull over. a
Yeah.
little something. Those are the things that it's like, all right, that wasn't me.
And
that
to
was,
honor our ego at the same time that says blah, 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 and say, oh, you're scared. Come here. And come over. Just put him right on the side. Put her right on the side and say, it's all right. It's all right.
so
Sometimes it just takes one person saying
So
that.
Edward, what was it? I mean, yesterday you actually had scheduled to take Tracy to an important appointment, and you canceled that to come help us.
No, he
No,
didn't.
you didn't. Oh, all right. We thought
No,
you did.
but he didn't know. But
I'll
he
let you-
was.
okay.
She didn't want me to go.
So why don't you go? Oh no.
No.
So you
Yeah.
felt rejected, so you came and helped us.
Completely rejected. Yeah, she didn't want me to go.
And he forgave her.
Well, you were a guardian angel for
She's
us
going to
yesterday.
clean this up here in a minute.
You were a guardian angel for us yesterday. So we're-
Yes, Ed. Thank you. Ed was our guardian angel yesterday.
And it really reminds me, that friendship, it seems like it always shows up in a more valuable form than we think we want it, because that was so unexpected and incredibly
Oh.
valuable.
Thank God.
Tracy?
Mhm. Ed, go first.
Ed's got
Ed, what was
nothing.
going? Ed, how did you feel when you were such a beautiful knight in shining armor for us yesterday? How did that feel for you? To be of such great
Because it inspired
service.
the service today. So
Mhm.
it's just who he is. It actually is. If you could see Ed, he's just sort of, shrugging his shoulders. And it's, if you know Ed, it's what he does. And he doesn't question why, or, for as long as we've known him. So anyway, thank you.
Thank you, Ed.
He's done with attention.
Yeah. Yeah.
Tracy, are you next?
Yeah, Tracy, what
He's
came
a
up for you?
walking example.
Yes.
Really is. And he doesn't have to try. It's like such a natural attribute that I think is wonderful for anyone to observe, but being able to know that and see that just one more time again myself was really, really special yesterday.
Mm.
And we were,
To help everybody else trying to figure out how you guys were involved.
Mhm.
I kept the phone on.
Go ahead, take the mic.
yeah, the
Yeah.
phone
So,
was,
so that everybody knows that's listening and wondering what the heck we're talking about. At the house there, when I went to the house, I turned the phone on, kept both of you guys on conference
let's
call.
just get it context.
Yeah.
So we have a house that was rented, and the renters were told no parties, and they had a huge party and disrupted the neighbors and ruined a bunch of stuff in the house. And we
Destroyed
were
things.
down in Irvine,
Mhm.
and there was we wake up in the morning, and I'm like, Ed, can you go over there, because the neighbors have been saying there's a party, and we got one person moving out, another person moving in 5 hours later. Can you just check and tell us how if we need to move them to another property, whatever? And Ed shows up, and we're on the phone,
On
and the
conference
neighbors
call.
start showing up, and people that were there last night are showing up looking for shoes and socks or whatever. And Ed handled it. So go ahead.
So when Tracy didn't want me to go to the beach with her yesterday, I had to do something, right? Yeah. So
It's meant to be.
basically just kept the phone on in my pocket
Mhm.
and the earbud in.
Mhm.
And so you guys, both of you, all
Heard
three of you
everything.
guys could be
Yes.
on conference call. So you guys could hear
The dialogue.
just how it was going,
Mhm.
you know?
Mhm.
Yeah. And, just to clear something up, historically speaking, and I know Jerry can probably attest to this. I know she can, that was a small party, historically speaking.
Relatively speaking.
Yes.
So you've
Yes.
dealt with
based
worse.
based on experience.
Okay.
Though it's not nice, for the way that they think they can do things now, or obviously do things now and go into somebody else's house and
Mhm.
just leave a complete disaster.
Right.
That's not how the game was played back in the day.
Mhm.
So
But Ed shows up, he's talking to the neighbors, and it was such a modeling. It was completely unexpected, not what we were planning to do that day. And to hear Ed just listening to the neighbors, no excuses, no, dramatic, we're so sorry. He was just like, yeah, this happened. And they're telling him about how bad it was and everything. And he's going, yeah, and it was so beautiful, because it wasn't this overdrawn apology, and it was just a guy caring. for everyone that was involved, for
Mhm.
everyone that showed up.
Yeah.
And I was just going, okay, that's what's
Wow.
possible in the face of pressure and chaos.
What a
is
beautiful example.
Gentleness.
Gentleness.
That's
And
what it was.
Ed always gets way more information from people because of his gentleness.
Yeah, and because he's not talking as much as he's listening.
Yeah.
They gave us, they were saying a lot of stuff, and we're like, oh. Now, Tamara and I are professional speakers. We show up and nobody gets a word in edgewise. We don't find out anything. We don't learn anything.
That
Anyway,
was so beautiful. Yeah. Yeah. And
so
Dylan, what came up for you, sweetheart?
What's that thing? It's like a scale and it has like two things on the side
Yep.
and you can, what is that called?
it's a lawyer's level,
A lawyer's.
the level.
That's all I could think about the entire time, where on one side you have ego, on the other side you have id.
Mhm.
And it's almost like if you put, if you get rid of a bunch of id, the ego goes up. But if you get rid of enough ego, wait, am I saying that right?
You're saying it right.
No, ego and
You're
id
saying it
are the
right.
same.
No, well, it is more of a rationale than ego.
Okay.
And so it's almost like if you get rid of a bunch of feeling and you're just kind of thinking rather than, allowing your emotions to take over, you're kind of, sometimes I feel like that's okay, but okay,
Mhm.
I need to slow down.
Okay. It was
So
beautiful.
my point being is that, I've kind of dealt with this problem of either feeling too much or not feeling too much, overthinking or being rational too much. And for a very long time in my life, I thought that it was wrong to feel because I grew up in that environment. And one day a counselor told me, it's okay to feel. It's human. I mean, we all have feelings. There's not a person on earth that does not have a feeling of some sort, and not just physical but emotional. Yeah, I mean, even if you're a sociopath, you'll probably have feelings of happiness at some point, even though those feelings of happiness might not be rational. But it's okay to feel, and it's, okay, sometimes it's okay to be rational and overthink sometimes, because that's sometimes that could probably save your life,
Mhm.
really.
Mhm.
And because if, for example, let's say you're like in a fight with someone, if you're feeling too much, you very well may lose control of yourself, and you could end up getting hurt if you just don't stop to think about, okay, what do I need to do to defend my life, rather than try and go just bat blank crazy all over them.
Right.
Well, and what I really
Right.
saw in you responding to was when we talked about gentleness. You really had an eye-opening moment. I'm imagining that one of the things you've learned, if I'm hearing where you're headed, is that if you're really harsh with your feelings, because everybody has them, if you beat them up, you're gonna be one of these maniacs, right?
Yeah.
But imagine being gentle.
Mhm.
Like what does he say? The therapist said it's okay to feel.
Mhm.
That's being gentle with your feelings. And it's something that, I'm wrestling with lately, is I've been, just going, what is going on? My machine in my brain that does all this blame and guilt and shame. And I'm like going, what is going on with you? And I'm trying, instead of just like, no, I'm just going to distract over here with what I'm grateful for. I'm trying to actually be gentle with those mechanisms, the mechanism of shame, and being gentle with it and say, okay, so what's with you? Why do you feel that you have to make somebody else feel this? Like, why are you saying these things? And it's really taking me into a place that's difficult, but I'm like going, I think I finally got the context right. Right. So, I know from what you've shared in the past that you've spoken a lot about how you've struggled, and I feel the tightness, because I really resonate with that, of when thoughts and feelings and they come up, and like this level thing, right? Like what, okay, they used to tell us as monks, when the ego steps out, God steps in. When the ego steps in, God steps out. So it is a wild balance. Am I a little bit on track here, Dylan? with
No,
reading
yeah.
into
And I
the-
mean, kind of the first thing that, was not only mentioned during this lesson, but when I first came in, is your fight with your thoughts. And I mean, that's how I was for a little bit not this past week, but kind of the week before, from like the days of like Thursday to about Tuesday. I have racing thoughts, and sometimes that can really get overbearing. And sometimes not all thoughts are bad. I mean, sometimes you have really good thoughts, or just like really weird thoughts. Like, I mean, you could think of something like banana peeled grapefruit juice. It's like, what? Like that's just how my mind works. I just think of the most random things, and it cracks me up. But there's other times where I have these negative thoughts, which might be not so negative, but they turn into more negative thoughts. And I had that for a while, but I won. And it's kind of that dark part of me that wants to come out, likes to come out. Sometimes I embrace it, so that way I can just kind of feed it, so that way it's satiated, and then it goes away for a bit. And that's just kind of how my thoughts work. And
I love
You
how
know,
your frenetic
I
thoughts
love that
Yeah.
because
channel themselves to your
in
fingers.
psychology, one of the things that is talked about is if you can imagine like the ego starting out as an innocent cub, like a lion cub. And if you take that innocent lion cub that just wants to bulldoze and play and kind of be disruptive, and you put it in a basement of your psyche and you don't feed it, it becomes rabid over time. And it waits for an opening in its environment to lash out, only to go back in shame. And one of the interventions or the therapeutic approach would be to give that cub a bone. Just give it a bone, feed it a bit so that it's not rabid. Just exactly like what you're saying is there's no part of us in our humanity and our divinity that something that we have to demolish or pummel or beat into submission, but there's an acceptance and a feeding that that can have those parts of us not behave like a psychopath, right? You embrace it. There are humanity parts of us that you can feed, you can accept, but you do not have to let rule your life. It doesn't have to be in the forefront. Give your cub a bone, right? Let your ego have comfort, but don't let it rule. You're the master. God is the master of your life. And when that is in place, everything else has its order. Everything else has its place. So thank you for that, Dylan. Thank you. Yeah.
Francis?
Last year, I believe in the chakras. I was in my solar plexus. That was the emotions. Boy, did I went through a lot of emotions. But even with the ego, I look and I forgive and let go. But the emotions were so deep because we always depressed our inner emotions that we had to let it go. For 7 months, I went through that to let it go of the emotions of the ego and stuff. So it was a very powerful transformation for me. So this year, in January, I become in my heart chakra. So that's is opening up for your love, the depressed emotions and stuff. So you got a year in each chakra that you have to release all. So I've been working on myself very hard, releasing, forgiving everybody who's are involved. It's not hard, easy sometimes, but you have to overcome, your insecurities, emotions and stuff. But it's a very good feeling when you do let go on the deepest part of
Breathe
you.
deep through them. Breathe deep. Let them process, let them filter through. Beautiful.
Thank
beautiful,
you, Francis. Would you like to share?
Mhm.
Yeah, usually I don't have a problem projecting.
Good.
That's actually, it's actually for Zoom.
It's for Zoom.
There's people online. So
If you can
use
just
the
speak
phone.
in.
Oh, now I'm nervous.
Ah.
Oh, it's okay. It's okay.
Three things, I guess. One, the spirit moves me very powerfully when it wants me to do something, and it told me to be here today. Lesson was on point for me. Thank you very much.
Mm.
Jesus set a high bar, but he always forgives us, so it's okay when we don't make that bar. And you've done a great job with the redirecting.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you.
so
And
much for being
imagine
here.
before Jesus, I mean, was there
Mhm.
anything really about forgiveness before Jesus came? I mean, was it even part of?
It was more about the law.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Jerry, did anything come up for you? He's good. Jerry's good. Okay. All right.
Good. That means you're going to be with us.
Huh?
You're going to be with us for a while.
Jerry's still content.
That's awesome.
I want to reach that place of Jerry where I actually have nothing to say for a minute.
No.
So
he's still on.
Judy,
Yeah,
you're
Judy.
online. How are you, Judy? There she is.
Good morning.
Good
morning.
morning.
I'm with the other person that said I got some work to do.
That was Jerry. Yeah.
I even got so mad at my dog this morning. He pooped on the floor. He's getting really old. And I should be feeling more gentle with him because of it. Instead, I get really upset with him because I know he knows better.
Oh.
Oh,
Mm.
yeah.
Yeah, it's a powerful lesson when people are like, oh boy, I got work to do. But we
Yeah.
always want to deliver it with gentleness. So be
Mhm.
gentle with yourself, Judy.
Yeah, be gentle, Judy. You deserve it.
Mhm.
Mhm.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay,
And
Padre.
Bert.
Hey, Dad, what came up for you today?
Well, I thought it was a very good lesson today. You did real close to what Jesus champions all us to do with our reactions to our neighbors. And I love the complete sermon.
Oh, thank you, Dad. Thank you so much. We love you so much. You're awesome. Thank you.
And just as a recap, we've said
Dad's
before,
an example of gentleness.
he is very much. And thank you, Padre.
Mhm.
So, we've said here so many times, and this is another thing Bert's just amazing at is just check your judgments at the door, right? We want
Mhm.
unity to be a place where you come in and you're just not judged. And,
Mhm.
and we've also mentioned that, because Tamara and I have seen what happens when the minister gets involved in, a lot of financial things and everything. So we love that we get to volunteer here and if any one of you feels that you have a message, we always love the interactive part. We learn so much when you guys are telling us what's going on for you and how it's working, and we're not. And it's wonderful to have your perspective. So we really appreciate you guys sharing. And we really appreciate that you kept that spirit up for so many months of just coming in here without judgments and without feeling like, what, this should be happening or that should be happening, and really having that spirit of gentleness with us and each other.
And we accept when this should be happening or that should be happening too. So that.
Yeah. If that comes in, it's time for us not to judge. So
There we go. Okay,
we
so
appreciate it.
our divine offering, our divine blessing is that divine love through me blesses and multiplies all that I have, all that I give, and all that I receive. Thank you, God. And Dylan's going to lead us in our peace song. Let there be peace on earth.
Let there be peace on earth, and let it begin with me. Let there be peace on earth, the peace that was meant to be. with God as creator. Family all are we. Let us walk with each other in perfect harmony. Let peace begin with me. Let this be the moment now. With every step I take, let this be my joyous vow. To take each moment and live each moment in peace eternally. Let there be peace on earth, and let it begin with me.
Hallelujah. The prayer of protection is that the light of God surrounds us, the love of God enfolds us, the power of God protects us, and the presence of God watches over us. Wherever we are, God is, and wherever God is, all is well. Everybody have a beautiful, beautiful, beautiful week. We love you guys. Next week is Easter, the resurrection time, and we really look forward to being together again. So we love
Yeah.
you guys.
And so prepare yourselves for resurrection.
Woohoo!
We look forward to it. Have a good week.
Have a